All right, I just picked up this Central Machinery 12-ton shop press from Harbor Freight for 186 bucks. And I thought I would give you my opinion on it for those of you who'd be interested in that. So a couple things before I talk about the press. I'm of the opinion that most of the time, myself included, we ask very stupid questions. We say things like, oh, what do you think of Harbor Freight tools? Or what do you think of Ferraris? Or what do you think of Snap-on tools? Or whatever. And that's really kind of a stupid question. I mean, Ferraris are great on the freeway and they're pretty awful off-roading. And Harbor Freight tools, in my opinion, have no place or almost no place in a professional shop. If you're running a business, then you should be buying something higher quality than Harbor Freight, is my opinion. Having worked in a shop and having worked with a lot of dealerships over the years. If you're a homeowner who wants to change your own oil, you probably have no business buying Snap-on unless you have more money than sense, because it's just not necessary. And I'm speaking as someone who owns Snap-on, because I used to work in a shop. And I own some nice tools from Snap-on and Bosch and Vera and Knipex and all of that. I also buy, in some cases, very cheap tools. And so I think the question, as my good friend Michael always tells me, the answer is almost always, it depends. So if you're a professional or an aspiring professional, I wouldn't buy Harbor Freight stuff. But if you're a homeowner or you do something every once in a while, or you're a retired mechanic like me and you want to do your own wheel bearings, and in this case it's cheaper to buy the parts to do it yourself than to pay a shop, then I think Harbor Freight has a place in the world. So yeah, a couple things. Obviously, in general, you get what you pay for. And so, there's some pretty appalling, welding slag and things like that, that you wouldn't expect out of a more expensive tool, but it's not an expensive tool. And there's some alignment issues. Things aren't exactly 90 degrees, but they don't really need to be. So I'm not going to critique this thing and tell you everything they could have done better, because we know what they could do better, and they could also charge a lot more money for it. I'll just point out a couple things that I think are worth addressing. As I already mentioned, or I will mention in a minute, these bolts were not very high quality. If you've ever worked with a press, it can be extremely dangerous because you can put a lot of pressure in the system and not really realize it, and then that pressure can come out all at one moment. That's why the nicer ones have a gauge built in so that you can see how much pressure you're generating, because sometimes you can't tell, am I just putting stress in the system or am I actually moving something? The other thing that you'll learn when you work with a press a lot is that the press itself isn't as important as like all of the basically the attachments and the accessories, or the dies, if you will, that you use. So these are pretty cheap. They're also pretty small. As you're working, you got to be really careful that things don't start to shift and then fall through the center of the table. So bigger of these would be a lot better. Again, these are very cheap, but that's what you'd expect. This is pretty wobbly. I can't remember the shop press that we had at the shop I worked at, but I know it didn't do that. So that is probably because they couldn't find a more economical way to keep this whole thing from wobbling around. And so that wobble will allow you to get things, I don't know, that's a full 1/4 inch of movement. So you can get things, off axis, which could be serious and dangerous. Another thing I think is just a little bit cheap is that they don't give you a jam nut for this. So over time, these things could loosen up and then the whole assembly could fall. You can obviously fix that yourself by throwing another nut on there, or use some Loctite, or bend that over, whatever you want to do. But I think that's worth addressing, and I'm going to address that just because over time, when you're using this thing, you have your mind focused on the pressing task at hand. And that's not a pun. But it can be very serious and very dangerous and very time consuming, or mentally consuming. And so you don't want to worry about, are all these things in place. Another thing that I think, I'm trying to remember what ours was, but these pins, these can move like this, and then the whole table drops. So a better solution would be ones that had, cotter pins, or like you have on a trailer. So, but you can add those, drill a hole through it, throw some cotter pins in there so that these pins can't come out and the whole table can't fall on you. So yeah, those would be the things that I think are probably worth addressing. Because these bolts were of such poor quality, it took a lot of force to get this outer C-channel to pinch around this inner C-channel to get this thing stable. Again, I used a 1/2-inch impact, which I think goes up to 800 foot-pounds or something like that, which I think a lot of guys might not have lying around the shop. So that was a little bit cheap, but other than that, again, you're paying $186 for something that you could also buy for $1,500. You know, and I've used those and they're nice. They're really nice, but it's hard to justify that just in a home shop where you're, you know, just doing odd jobs and things like that, like this garage is. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are kind of sloppy. I mean, the fit and finish here is really sloppy. This thing's going to fall out and hit your toes a lot. But again, you know, what do you expect? They did use grade 8 bolts here, and the threads were actually pretty good. I thought those were going to be super chintzy, but they were pretty good. So yeah, should you buy this for yourself? Well, as my friend Michael would say, it depends. If you're opening up a new shop, I would say you should have slightly higher standards. If you're a guy like me, I would say go for it. And yeah, there's a place for cheap tools in life, and there's a place for good tools in life. And I've made that mistake a few times buying expensive tools when a cheap one would have done, and I regret it. I wish I'd gone to Harbor Freight. And there's been a couple times when I bought a cheap one thinking it would do the job of the good one, and I learned the hard way and had to buy it twice. So that's called life, experience, and wisdom, and I'm hoping to get a little more of it soon. All right, folks, hope you liked that. If not, give it a thumbs down. Let me know. If you did like it, I'm really happy, and I hope you guys have a great day, and next week, a Merry Christmas.